So welcome to session 2 of Appliqué, hand needle turn appliqué with Jan Paddock. And now we're going to do stars. And let me show you, this is what we're working on right here. We've got this star right here on this little black square. We're going to show you how to do that. One of the mysteries and craziness of appliqué for anybody are those points, those little points, perfect points. And this gal has a method that will ease your mind. You'll be able to do it. So why don't you get us started here?
Okay, we have already traced our pattern, our star from our pattern onto freezer paper, cut it out, and ironed it to our piece of fabric. That's the first thing we need to do. Now, once again, these are our stitching lines. So now what we need to do is draw around the stitching line. And this is where your sandpaper board comes in so well, because what it does is it holds your fabric in place so that when you trace around the pattern, the fabric doesn't stretch. If the fabric stretches, then when you cut it out, your pattern's not going to look like it did on the piece of paper. So you draw around the edge of the outside of the freezer paper, and it holds the fabric in place, which is what it's done.
And the drawn line is your stitch line. Now, if you're unclear on any of these, the freezer paper directions or any of that, you can look back to session 1 because we covered, the tracing and the ironing on in session 1. And so it's right there for you.
It's also in the directions for the pattern, but it's really kind of nice to look at both. Okay. Now that we've drawn precisely around there, we're going to cut it out, and we're just going to eyeball a 1/4 inch. This doesn't have to be precise. We're not piecing it together on a sewing machine. We're going to applique it down.
And when you do this star, you're going to actually learn the outer points and the inner points, because sometimes that little inner point can be a challenge as well. So,
okay, when you get to the point, I square them off about a 1/4 inch from the end of the thing. If you want to just go ahead and cut it straight and square them off later, you can, but I do it when I'm cutting them out. And quite truthfully, you can take your paper off if it starts coming loose, which it may.
Because you have your drawn line.
Because you have your drawn line, and you just sew or cut a 1/4 inch outside your drawn line.
It might be a little hard to see our drawn line, but it's there.
Yeah, maybe I should have left the paper on.
That's all right.
Okay, now.
One of the fun things about Jan's stars is she does a lot of primitive work, and so all the stars are always a little wonky, and it just makes it a lot of fun.
Okay, so we ironed the paper back on so we could see what we're doing with the lines. It's easier. Now what we want to do is cut to each inside point precisely.
And we mostly ironed this back on for the camera so you guys could see it better, but if you have it in your hand, you can see the lines and you don't need to add the paper back on.
Okay, now it's all ironed in. And another reason to do it is I marked on the paper which way is up. Sometimes that's easier with stars, like as you could see when I was having trouble getting it back on. Now, put it on your square with your point that goes up, going up, and put a pin in.
Here, Jan, let me move this sandpaper board. You'll be able to see that black better on the green.
Okay, now, let's get rid of this little thing. As anybody knows that's tried to do needlepoint applique or needle turn applique or any kind of applique, the problems with points come at the outside point out here and the inside point. And since those are your two problem areas, you never start there. You start really about in the middle down one leg of the star, and you just finger press it down along the line.
Using the line as your guide, yeah.
Yes. And then take your needle underneath the block and come up about halfway through down the line and catch both your back. First you got to put a knot in your thread. Works better if you do that.
It does work.
Yeah, it is. once again. Now, come up and catch the background and the very edge of the line and do your basic applique stitch that we showed you in the last one. You go in just behind at an angle and come about between 1/16 and 1/18 of an inch. And we're going to, trying not to catch the point, but if you do, get it loose.
Now when she said finger press, what she means is, you know, like with her fingernails, she'll crease right on that line so that that edge will lay down, and then you can, it just lays down a little smoother.
Okay, now you're going to stitch up until one stitch before the inside point. And you're going to stop there, and you're going to take the next point and you're going to turn it way under. And did you see that are you close enough? You can see these little threads were trying to stick up, okay? And that's the problem with inside points, those little threads. When you turn it like this, then take your needle and push them under. You can still see where your point is. You now sew to that point, and you take a double stitch.
And so she folded that next leg, not on the line, but way in, because she's just going to take a couple of stitches and she wants to make sure she catches those little threads.
When you push them way under, you can almost...
Now you release the leg will come back out.
And once again, finger press it along the line. So now you've got your crease where you're supposed to sew. And see that little thing that was trying to stick out. Fabric is woven at right angles, and when you do these points, you're making it go at not right angles, and it gets cranky.
It doesn't like it.
It doesn't like it. It sticks little things out. Now we're going to sew up to...
Now she's heading down to the point, and you can, you're sailing down a straight line, so you can go pretty fast to this. And then just before you get to the point...
Well, no, you go to the point.
To the point, okay.
It's just before on the inside.
To the point on the outside.
To the point on the outside point. Okay. That was a binding stitch. On the outside point, we're going to make a stay stitch, which means...
Now remember, the point is still going to be like 1/4 inch in. You go to the end of your line because you're going to have that fabric sticking up.
Right, yeah. You don't sew to the end of the fabric. You sew to the end of your stitching line. And you make a double stitch right there at that point. Now, at this time, you take your needle and you put it down there because it's really not much use right now. You've got all this fabric here. You've got a stay stitch. You fold this back. See all that fabric there? If you try to turn that under, you're going to have a big lump. So you don't turn it under. You take it and you trim it at an angle.
Yeah, let me show you. Let me put this little piece on here. It's just this little end piece right here.
Right. Now we're going to take the top piece and trim it at an angle too. And remember, we cut this across. When we cut up, see, these are cut across. They're not clear out where the point would be. So, but even with that, now what we're going to do is trim this.
It's this trimming that really helps you have a nice sharp point.
Now, once again, you don't have your needle in your hand right now. You have your finger under here, and you have your finger here, and you make a hospital corner, which means you fold that straight across. Any woman that's made a bed should know what a hospital corner is. Although some of the younger ones with fitted sheets may not. But anyway, straight across, so there's a straight line there. Now, once again, you pick it up and you're pressing against your finger under here and you fold it under. Now you take your needle, you pull it, it's a point, your thumb's right there, and you sew. And you needle turn all that stuff.
And see how she puts that needle in from that next corner and just sweeps it along, and all that fabric just rolls in. And here, come out here a little bits.
Okay, let me get the needle in there so I don't lose my stitch.
And then she's got that point. She she folded it straight across, did the hospital corner. If you don't know what a hospital corner is, ask an old military man. They know what a hospital corner is. Anyway, it goes straight across, and then you fold that side piece down, and you can start down the other side, and your points are great. I did a quilt one time that had chicken feet on it, and and it was one of Jan's quilts, and those chicken feet, I mean, they're more narrow than a star point,
Yeah,
but this method works for it.
Still
And
works.
I had to get a brush-up course from Jan. I'm like, I can't get these chicken feet. I actually had to cut them out a couple times because they kept fraying.
Yeah. And if they fray, people, okay, now we're almost to that inside point again, so we're going to stop, and then we're going to turn this way under. And see, once again, we've got a little thing sticking out there. Take your needle and turn it under, and then go down there and make another little binding stitch.
So she stopped again, one stitch before, flipped that leg way under, swept it across to get the threads in, and then you just stitch across there. Then you release that leg and fold it on the line. That's such a great tip because it just helps so much with getting those inside curves. You know, a lot of times we're like sewing almost on raw fabric because there's just not very much room right there, but boy, that is a great tip.
And particularly with your outside point, if you have trouble, and what I have people do when I teach this is I give them a practice one before the one that they're putting in the quilt.
I think that's a really good idea.
Because then when you get to this outside point, that's where most people have trouble with things fraying. If you have trouble and this is frayed to the point where you really can't get it turned under right, just pull your stitches out a couple and back it up. There's no applique police. They're not going to know your star has a leg that's a little bit shorter than it's supposed to be. That's what's really neat about primitive quilting is it's not really precision.
Okay, now we're back at this point. We're going to go through it again.
Okay,
so you can watch it one more time. So she took an extra stitch right there at the point where her lines come together, your tracing lines come together, sets the needle down, sticks it in there so it doesn't fall off.
And the reason it's called a stay stitch is you're going to bend all this fabric back and you want that point to stay right there.
Yeah, you want it.
So now you pull this back, trim this off.
See, it's just kind of a little wing that sticks up and you trim that off.
Right beside my chair where I sit in applique, there's a whole pile of these things every night when we do it. Okay. Then you put it down.
We're glad for vacuums.
Yeah.
Now she's trimming off that little edge piece.
And you trim that again. And you know, I may have trimmed. You're better off trimming it too long than too short because you can always take more off. It's hard to put more on. If you get it too short, I don't think I have, but in case I have, just back that stitch down a couple pieces down to there. Take the thread out. Okay, your finger's under here. You're pushing against your finger. Yeah, you fold it straight across and then you fold it under.
Look at that nice little point.
And see, this is why I've never done a book on needle turn applique. You just can't describe that. You have to see it.
Although loads of her quilts have been in books. She does have quite a lot.
Yeah, but what I say is applique the star in place.
Yes. Now I want to show you some quilts with stars because she's done some beautiful things. And once you know how to do a star, they're just amazing. They're just really beautiful.
And this works quite as well with birds' beaks, chicken feet.
Yes, anything with a point.
Leaf points.
Yeah.
Anytime you have a point, you can use this technique.
So now you've gone all the way around and you're at the ending. And this is the only part that's a little different. And
it really helps when you start, if you start quite a ways down this leg, because then you have more room to maneuver up here. Because you can't fold it as easily.
You can't fold the next leg back because it's already attached.
Right. It's already sewed, so it's a little harder to maneuver. But basically, you use the same technique. You do your stay stitch here.
So you do the same thing. You come up to the end.
Right.
Do one more stitch so that it won't come out, and
Now you have to fold this back, and you have to be careful when you're cutting here that you don't cut your star. That's the only problem here. And then I tend to, if there's too much here, cut it off a little more square.
You still make that little hospital corner across the top.
Right. And we're going to hope this works.
And then fold that in. Look at that.
It did. It's not, it usually is not quite as pointy as your others, but don't tell anybody.
I was going to say, I think that looks pretty good.
They won't. Yeah.
And then you just sew right down that side to where you began.
And then you end it the same way you ended the other one. You make a double stitch with a, you go to the back. I always go to the back if I can to end it.
Perfect.
That needs to
I want to show this quilt of Jan's. It's got stars all over it. I want you to see some of the things you can do.
Now, those are pieced.
Let's see.
These
She's got
are
stars in
stars.
blocks. Here, hold
Now,
this
those are
corner up.
pieced stars. This is a star tree.
Look at this star tree. Isn't that great?
This was inspired by Natalie's wedge.
Yeah.
It's big, it's smaller because I couldn't make a border that size. But you have stars everywhere.
Everywhere, all over here, here. Even on the one behind us right here. So
Where
now
there's
that you
stars.
can make a star, you can do anything from chicken feet to beaks to leaf points, anything you need to know. So join us in session 3 for
Stems, leaves, and circles.
stems, leaves, and circles. We'll see you then.